We have all been there. You have a massive, soul-crushing crush on a close friend, and instead of just telling them how you feel like a normal human being, you do absolutely everything else to avoid it, and you suffer in silence. But what if you could bypass all the angst and yearning and just force them to love you? This is the premise of Obsession, the 2026 breakout psychological horror sensation directed by YouTuber Curry Barker. Made on a shoestring budget of $750,000, this movie managed to strike absolute gold at the box office, grossing hundreds of millions of dollars by tapping into our deepest fears of toxic relationships, emotional manipulation, and modern nice guy entitlement. But as terrifying as the film's monkey's paw curse is, we need to talk about the sheer, unadulterated stupidity on display. The supernatural might be driving the plot, but human error, specifically Bear's colossal lack of survival instincts, is what drives the body count. From ignoring obvious red flags to handling a demonic entity like a bad case of the flu, today we are breaking down every single boneheaded choice, dissecting the total absence of logical thinking and the terrifyingly bad choices that turned a standard unrequited crush into a bloody psychological nightmare. Grab your boyfriends or girlfriends, and if you're single, sit tight and brace yourselves. This is Every Dumb Decision in Obsession. The film opens in a diner where a young man named Bear is rehearsing with the waitress over how he might confess his feelings to his childhood friend and longtime crush, Nikki. While the waitress thinks it's sweet, Bear's best friend Ian thinks it's corny. Bear just wants some alone time with Nikki, but they are all going to trivia night later with Ian and their other friend Sarah. When Bear goes home, he discovers his cat Sandy dead, as she had accidentally gotten into his oxycodone. Bear puts her body in a garbage bag and then cries in his room. First of all, why on earth is a highly potent lethal prescription opioid like oxycodone just lying around completely accessible to a domestic house pet? Did he leave it scattered on the kitchen counter like a handful of spilled kibble? This is irresponsible pet ownership of the highest order. But the real kicker, the absolute gold medal in the brainless Olympics, is how he handles the aftermath. Your beloved childhood pet, a creature you supposedly love, passes away due to your own household negligence. Do you call a veterinarian? Do you give her a proper burial in the backyard? Do you seek any form of professional guidance or cremation services? No. Bear looks at his deceased companion and decides that the most appropriate final resting place for a beloved pet is a standard plastic, hefty drawstring trash bag, tossed carelessly into the household garbage like a half-eaten burrito or an empty milk carton. The psychological disconnect required to treat a family pet like literal municipal waste while simultaneously retreating to your room to sob over the tragedy is wild. It sets a baseline for Bear's decision-making skills that is so incredibly subterranean, you already know this man does not possess the cognitive bandwidth to handle a real-life crisis. He is operating on a level of pure, unguided impulse, where consequences do not exist until they are staring him directly in the face. Bear later talks to Nikki on the phone as she tells him that she is planning to put in her 2 weeks' notice at their job. He overhears her saying she dropped a crystal necklace down a sewer drain. Bear goes to a shop to buy her a replacement necklace, but then sees something called a one-wish willow, which he also purchases. Now, looking at this through the eyes of a completely normal person who has no idea he's trapped in a horror movie, this is still an incredibly goofy, desperate move. Who buys a random, gimmicky novelty item from a dusty antique shop and actually expects it to do something? If you are looking for a replacement necklace to impress a girl, you buy the replacement necklace, or something pretty and similar enough to that. You do not look at a strange, cheap-looking wooden knickknack and decide to add it to your cart like a pack of gum at a supermarket checkout line just because it has a quirky name. Bear is so utterly desperate for a shortcut to affection that he bypasses all logic, spending money on what any rational consumer would assume is a useless piece of tourist trap junk. It shows a complete lack of romance and an alarming vulnerability to obvious novelty scams. Bear joins Nikki, Ian, and Sarah for trivia night. Afterwards, Bear drops Nikki off at home. He wants to confess his feelings to her, but he is too awkward and he refers to her as Freaky Nikki, a nickname she despises. If you are trying to woo the woman of your dreams, a girl you have loved since childhood, why would you choose the exact moments of romantic vulnerability to pull out a derogatory, embarrassing nickname that she has explicitly stated she hates? It is an act of sheer self-sabotage. It is as if Bear's brain actively rejects any opportunity to behave like a well-adjusted adult. He builds up this massive internal pressure to confess his love, and then instead of using genuine words or even just a standard compliment, he reverts to a bizarre, alienating insult that completely kills the mood and guarantees an uncomfortable reaction. Annoyed, Nikki asks Bear if he likes her. He just denies it and says he sees her as a friend. After Nikki goes back inside, Bear takes out the one-wish willow and wishes for Nikki to love him more than anyone in the world. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a normal, albeit highly insecure guy. You just fumbled a major romantic moment, you're sitting alone in your car feeling like a complete loser, and you look down at this silly wooden novelty item you bought earlier. A normal person might roll their eyes, say the wish out loud as a joke or a sad vent of frustration, and then toss the twig into the glove box. Him breaking this is already a huge red flag. Why are you so angry to the point of destroying the gift you got for someone because of your own mistake? It's giving narcissistic, and it's as if he was hoping the wish would actually work with the power of pure delusion. But even from a purely psychological standpoint, making a wish for someone to love you more than anyone in the world, even into a piece of wood you think is fake, reveals a deeply toxic, selfish mindset. He is so blinded by his own bruised ego and romantic desperation that he resorts to accidentally wishing away the free will of his oldest friend, treating love like something that can be cheated into existence rather than earned through a simple, honest conversation. Now, let us examine the immediate aftermath of this incredibly cringeworthy car wish, because the sheer lack of logical continuity here should have caused massive alarm bells to ring for any ordinary person. Nikki suddenly reappears and offers to go home with Bear, saying she feels bad because her dad is dying of cancer. When they get home, Nikki asks Bear to sleep with her. They start kissing until she suddenly pulls back in terror, claiming that there is something behind Bear. Look at this purely from the perspective of a regular, rational human being who just dropped a girl at her doorstep. She is visibly annoyed with you, she explicitly rejects any romantic tension by treating you just like a friend, and she goes inside her house. You sit in your car for maybe 2 minutes, mumble a desperate phrase into a wooden trinket, and suddenly she materializes back at your passenger window completely transformed. She completely contradicts her behavior from 2 minutes ago, drops a massive bomb about her father having terminal cancer out of nowhere, and demands to go home with you. A normal, clear-thinking person would be completely bewildered by this whiplash. You would think, wait a minute, how did we go from an awkward nickname argument to a tragic cancer diagnosis and a sudden desire for intimacy in the span of 120 seconds? But Bear is so entirely blinded by his own pathetic validation seeking that he doesn't question the sudden, manic shift in her reality. He just takes it as a massive win for his ego. Then they get back to his place and the situation moves from bizarre to genuinely alarming. They are kissing and she suddenly pulls back in absolute terror. This is the precise moment where a normal person's survival instincts should override any desire for physical intimacy. If you are in a quiet room with someone who freezes up looking over your shoulder with genuine, unadulterated fear, you don't just brush it off. But Bear is so desperate to finally get the girl that he treats a literal manifestation of pure terror like a minor roadblock to getting lucky. He completely fails to recognize that her sudden, unnatural shift in affection is directly tied to a dark, unhinged energy that is already manifesting in his own living room. In the morning, Bear finds that Nikki made a memorial for Sandy by taking her body out of the trash and putting it on the kitchen floor, which just disturbs Bear. Nikki says she took something that has been making her act weird. Let us really think about this imagery. You walk into your kitchen to make a cup of coffee, and your new girlfriend has retrieved the stiff, cold, chemically poisoned corpse of your cat out of the garbage bag and arranged it into a horrific makeshift shrine right on the linoleum. This is the exact moment where the normal person excuse completely expires. This isn't just a quirky relationship hiccup. This is a flashing neon sign screaming that something supernatural, or at the very least, deeply dangerous and psychotic, has taken total control of this person. Any normal human being with a shred of survival instinct would immediately back away, leave the house, and call for emergency medical or psychological intervention. But Bear just gets a little disturbed. He accepts her incredibly flimsy, vague excuse that she took something that has been making her act weird, as if a bad reaction to an over-the-counter supplement or a party drug naturally causes a person to engage in casual taxidermy rituals with dead house pets. His refusal to acknowledge the blatant, terrifying reality of the situation is mind-boggling. Eventually, Bear and Nikki start dating, which confuses Ian and Sarah for how sudden it feels. While they're out at dinner, Bear gets a call from Ian. He tells Bear that he's done some digging and learned that Nikki's dad is completely healthy, and Nikki doesn't even have a good relationship with him. Furthermore, Ian says that Sarah told him that she and Nikki talked about Bear and she just saw him as a little brother. When Bear goes to ask Nikki the truth about her dad, she starts to yell and throw a tantrum in the middle of the restaurant until Bear calms her down. They later go back to his place to have coitus, while Nikki doesn't seem to be in control of herself. This is an absolute masterclass in catastrophic denial. Your best friend calls you with concrete proof that your new partner fabricated a terminal cancer diagnosis for her own father just to gain sympathy and manipulation leverage. On top of that, you know for a fact that her genuine feelings towards you were purely platonic just days ago. When confronted with a lie of this magnitude, a lie that completely destabilizes the foundation of her sanity, Nikki responds by throwing a public, screaming tantrum in a crowded restaurant. This is the moment where you ask for the check, apologize to the staff, and walk out of her life forever because you know this isn't normal. Instead, Bear de-escalates the situation, ignores the blatant warning signs of pathological lying and emotional instability, and takes her right back to his bed. Engaging in intimacy with someone who visibly does not seem to be in control of their own body or mind is not only deeply disturbing, but it's also an incredibly dangerous decision that binds him even closer to a ticking time bomb. At night, Nikki stands in the corner creepily watching Bear sleep. When he tries to leave the bed, she screams at him to stay with her. Imagine waking up in the dead of night and seeing the person sharing your bed standing completely still in the corner, staring at you like an extra from a horror movie. That is the universal signal to run. That is the moment you realize your life is in immediate mortal peril and that whatever fake wish you made has manifested into an actual demonic or deeply psychotic haunting. Yet, when Bear tries to simply get out of bed and she screams at him like a banshee, his response is to just comply and stay there. He allows himself to be held hostage in his own bed by a person who is clearly displaying horrific symptoms of possession. His passivity is infuriating. By refusing to establish boundaries or seek help when she is literally acting like a sleep paralysis demon, he reinforces her total control over him and guarantees that the situation will get infinitely worse. The next day, Bear's getting ready to leave for work, but sees that Nikki has duct taped the whole front door. She gives him a lunchbox to bring to work, then stands by the door just smiling and peeing herself. At work, Bear is talking to Sarah before taking a bite of the sandwich and finding a note from Nikki that says, "How's the verdict, cat?" Bear lifts the bread and sees Sandy's paw, causing him to vomit. Let us take a step back and look at the sequence of events leading up to this. A woman duct tapes your entire front door, hands you a lunchbox, and then literally urinates on herself while smiling at you like a maniac. Under what possible logical framework do you take that lunchbox, drive to your place of employment, open it up, and actually try to eat the food inside? If a person who is visibly losing control of their bodily functions and holding you captive makes you a meal, that meal is compromised. It is either poisoned, drugged, or in this horrific case, contains the severed anatomy of your deceased, contaminated pet. Bear's decision to blindly trust the culinary creations of a clearly deranged, urine-soaked individual is a level of stupidity that is genuinely hard to fathom. He literally had to ignore ignore every single basic instinct of self-preservation and common sense to take a bite of that sandwich. In his car, he calls the number for the one-wish willow and speaks to a representative that tells him the wish cannot be altered or undone, and only ends when the person who made the wish dies. The rep then puts the real Nikki on the phone, and she is just screaming. When he returns home, he finds Nikki standing in the same place she was before, covered in urine, vomit, and feces. After discovering his dead cat in his lunch, seeing Nikki's deranged behavior, and hearing the literal soul of his crush screaming in supernatural torment over the phone, any lingering doubt about the supernatural reality of the situation is completely gone. Bear now knows exactly what he did. Yet what does he do? Does he run? Does he go into hiding? No. His brilliant decision is to just walk right back into that house with the knowledge of the fact that it's a supernatural entity waiting for him behind that door. The level of biohazard alone should have kept him away, even without the terrifying curse confirmation. This woman is a literal walking biological disaster zone, completely consumed by a curse that he inflicted upon her, and he just walks right back through the front door as if he's coming home from a mundane day at the office. There is no plan, no strategy, no attempt to call an ambulance or a hazmat team. He just continues to cohabitate with a decaying, cursed entity in a house that must smell absolutely ungodly at this point. It is a monumental failure of basic human logic. Ian expresses concern for Bear and invites him to a party. Bear tries to go without Nikki, but she protests enough that he brings her along to Ian's party. This is a staggering betrayal of friendship and safety. You know your girlfriend is a cursed, unhygienic monster who was currently covered in bodily fluids, mentally unstable, and capable of mutilating dead animals. Why on earth would you bring her to a party at your best friend's house? Even if she protests, even if she throws a tantrum, you do not bring a literal supernatural biohazard into a house full of innocent, unsuspecting people. He should have locked her in a room, or better yet, stayed far away himself. Bringing her along is an act of sheer cowardice and stupidity that directly puts everyone he cares about in immediate moral danger. The party plays a game of drunk Jenga, which takes a turn when Nikki goes up and recites an incestuous monologue of Hansel and Gretel that makes everyone uncomfortable. Instead of using this incredibly awkward and deeply disturbing moment as an immediate excuse to grab her by the arm, apologize to the host, and exit the building, Bear just stays seated. He watches his clearly possessed girlfriend ruin the social atmosphere with a deeply creepy, inappropriate speech, and decides that the best course of action is to just keep playing the party game. His passivity in social situations is almost as terrifying as the curse itself. He completely refuses to take control of the situation, choosing instead to let the train wreck continue to unfold in front of all his friends. When Bear goes up, his block reads, "Kiss the person to your left," which happens to be Sarah. Nikki pulls Sarah out of the way and sits in her place, so Bear has no choice but to kiss her. Nikki is physically displacing people and forcing a confrontation in the middle of a party game. The real Nikki seems to snap out momentarily and begins stabbing herself in the face with a broken beer bottle. Bear goes to the hospital to try to get Nikki help, but he's denied for some reason. Now, while the hospital's refusal to admit a woman who is actively mutilating her own body with a broken glass bottle is a massive plot convenience and an institutional failure, Bear's decision to just give up and leave is incredibly dumb. If an emergency room turns away a person covered in blood who is actively you don't just say, "Oh well, I guess we'll just go home then." You make a scene. You call the police from the lobby. You demand to speak to the chief of medicine. You don't just pack a severely injured, violently psychotic, cursed person back into your sedan and drive back to your suburban home. His complete lack of urgency and assertiveness in a literal life or death medical crisis is utterly baffling. Bear brings Nikki home and gets a text from Sarah to meet her. As Bear is leaving, the real Nikki speaks up and begs Bear to kill her while she is asleep. Bear simply asks, what's so bad about being with him? Let us really absorb the breathtaking narcissism on display here. A woman whose soul is trapped in a supernatural hellscape, who is actively mutilating her own body and losing her mind, begs you to end her life to save her from the torment. And Bear's response is to get his feelings hurt. He asks what's so bad about being with him, as if this entire horrific ordeal is just a minor relationship squabble, or a critique of his dating style. He's so utterly self-absorbed and desperate for validation that he can't see the cosmic horror right in front of him. He prioritizes his own fragile ego over a literal cry for mercy from a woman he claims to love. First, he leaves the woman who just stabbed herself in the face alone in the house completely unsupervised, where she can easily find more weapons or finish the job. Second, he decides to go meet Sarah, knowing full well that Nikki is a deeply possessive supernatural stalker who will undoubtedly notice his absence and hunt him down. He's actively creating a scenario where Sarah is put directly in harm's way, all because he can't manage to stay in one place or make a logical decision under pressure. Sarah is also stupid, pushing to meet Bear despite his refusal. She's seen firsthand how this new Nikki acts and what could be so important that it had to be discussed that night. Why not wait until the next day when he comes to work? She tells him that Ian and Nikki were hooking up on and off for several years, and Ian thinks that Nikki is dating Bear to get back at him. It's also implied that Sarah likes Bear, but before either of them can act on their feelings, Nikki comes charging towards the car. She smashes the window and then repeatedly slams Sarah's face onto a brick until she's dead and her face is gone. A terrified Bear helps Nikki move Sarah's body. I would like to start off by saying Sarah is very dumb for trying to reveal her feelings to Bear right in front of his house where his girlfriend lives. Like, what was the end goal here? You're expecting him to leave the woman he loves for you? The immediate aftermath of this brutal murder cements Bear not just as a fool, but a literal criminal accomplice. A terrified Bear helps Nikki move Sarah's body. This is a massive, irrevocable turning point. Up until now, Bear was a victim of his own stupidity and a supernatural curse. The moment he bends down, grabs the cold ankles of his murdered friend, and helps a blood-soaked maniac hide the evidence, he becomes an accessory to first-degree murder. He has officially crossed the line into total complicity. Bear goes back to the antique shop to get another one-wish willow to try to undo the wish, but he's unable to break the willow in half like the first time since he already used his wish. He goes to Ian's home to try to get him to make the wish for Bear to have never made the wish, but Ian sarcastically wishes for $1 billion, and money instantly starts raining from the ceiling. Think about how poorly Bear must have explained the situation for Ian to think it was a joke. You are dealing with a literal life or death supernatural possession scenario where people are dying, and you fail so completely at communicating the gravity of the situation that your friend thinks it's a fun time to make a sarcastic joke about $1 billion. Bear's lack of communication skills combined with his decision to bring a volatile, deadly secret to a selfish guy like Ian without any preparation or physical proof completely tanked his last desperate hope of resolving the crisis cleanly. Bear goes back to the house to find that Nikki propped up Sarah's corpse in the living room. He wants to get Nikki to reverse the wish by giving her a willow, but she plans to shoot him and herself. Ian comes in out of nowhere, leading to Nikki shooting him in the head. While Ian walking into a dark house unannounced is incredibly foolish on his part, Bear's complete failure to secure the environment, warn his friend, or take control of the firearm before things escalated is just par for the course. He stands by as a passive observer as his childhood friend is executed right in front of him, once again showing that he is utterly incapable of taking decisive action to prevent tragedy. Bear runs, leaving the last one wish willow in the room alone with Nikki. You went through all the trouble of getting a second magical artifact, your friend just got shot in the head trying to resolve this mess, and when you run away to hide, you leave the literal, all-powerful wishing device right there on the floor next to the killer. He hands the antagonist the exact tool she needs to extend the nightmare, completely undoing any potential leverage he had left. It is a stunning display of panic overriding any semblance of rational thought. He locks himself in the bathroom and decides it's time to end it. He almost shoots himself in the head, but instead overdoses on the same oxycodone that killed Sandy. When Bear exits the bathroom, Nikki has already broken the willow so that Bear can be in love with her. They share a final kiss until Bear collapses. Nikki holds him in her arms and almost shoots herself in the head until the wish wears off. Nikki snaps back to normal and begins screaming hysterically at all the dead bodies around her. And let's talk about how incredibly, profoundly unfair this ending is to the real Nikki. She was the ultimate victim of Bear's massive, unchecked ego. She never consented to any of this. And now that she's back, what is she even supposed to do? She is the only living person at a horrific crime scene with 3 dead bodies. Her fingerprints are all over the murder weapons, and she has absolutely no way to explain a magical wooden wish stick to a jury. The bleak reality of obsession is that after the credits roll, the real Nikki is almost certainly going to spend the rest of her life in jail for a mass murder she had absolutely no control over. Nikki is left completely traumatized, standing in a house full of the decomposing, mutilated corpses of her closest friends, entirely conscious of a horror she had no control over, all because Bear couldn't handle a little bit of romantic rejection. When you look at the entire timeline, every single ounce of this horrific chaos was 100% preventable. It wasn't just one bad choice, it was a continuous chain of characters refusing to act with basic logic. If Bear had just been honest in the car, if Sarah hadn't made a poorly timed confession, and if Ian hadn't jokingly wished for $1 billion, and if Bear hadn't ignored a mountain of terrifying red flags, everyone would still be alive to play pub trivia next Tuesday. But instead, we got a house full of corpses, a room full of useless billionaire cash, and a final lesson that will live in our heads forever. If a novelty toy tells you it grants wishes, just leave it on the shelf and buy the crystal necklace. What do you think was the absolute dumbest choice made in this entire movie? Was it Bear ignoring the red flags, helping hide Sarah's body, or Ian driving over to a suspected magic house? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.